I think it's important to be a storyteller no matter what your role is. But if you're a leader today, like in AI, if folks that are listening, if you aren't developing your AI centric stories right now, like AI adoption stories, AI, how does the human fit in stories?
There were so many things that I saw, so many things I wanted to communicate that I wanted to jam into people's brains. And I overstoried people. I tried to do too many things at once. And it was because I felt I've got to get all this out there. I've got to make all of this happen.
Yeah.
And then it was too much, too often, and the impact was minimal.
Entry music. Da, 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 da. It's the Bob and Josh show.
We are doing a 2 birds, 1 stone. Bob, do you have any sound effects? Okay. So for those of you wondering what that was, that was Bob hitting 2 birds with 1 stone.
1 stone. They're both dead.
Gosh. Oh my goodness. Yeah. So Bob has turned into our Foley artist. He's our sound effects guy now, all of a sudden, in case you didn't know. Folks, it has been like this for, let's see, about 15 minutes straight. So get ready for a ride. So storytelling is something that Bob is passionate about. Bob has like techniques and approaches and theories. And I think I'm a decent storyteller, but I operate differently. It just kind of falls out of my brain based on historical stuff that I've run into and learned and studied and all that stuff. So one of the things also that Bob and I were talking about pre-episode is we have a perceived issue in the industry with which we work where there's where there's a lack of willingness to seek help. So as we were talking about this topic, Bob rattled off like 5 things he does. And like, I don't do any of that. So Bob's going to do a little bit of live coaching, a little bit of helping Josh get better at storytelling. Number 1, that's going to help us all get better at storytelling. But number 2, it's going to be, hey, reminder, there's some really good help out there. And you know what? Most of it's free. You just got to go get it. So 2 birds, 1 stone, storytelling, reach out, get help, because there's a lot of free help out there. All right. So, Bob, I'm coming to you, and I've read some Substack. I don't know, maybe like bobgalen.substack.com or something like that digs into storytelling and all of his techniques. And I'm like, Bob, I don't do any of that. Like something just like poof shows up into my head and then I start saying words. But it sounds like there's techniques and skills and things out there that I don't have. What am I not doing?
So first thing, if you're going to learn, I would say empty your cup a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Let me take a drink.
Yeah. So empty your cup. And so that you can fill it up with some new wisdom. Okay.
Okay.
So, all joking aside, we've talked before about coachability, humility, and in order to learn something, create space for it. So Metacasters, so empty your cup a little bit. The first thing that comes to mind, storytelling, Josh, it's a Jerry Weinberg quote, and I learned this from Jerry. He wrote a book, Weinberg on Writing, and he talked about his writing style was to capture fieldstones. He called it the fieldstone method, where he didn't recommend that you write. He write something, a thought from start to finish.
Mm-hmm.
He said, find fieldstones and mine your life for fieldstones. Mine your professional life, mine your personal life, whatever. Mine your life for fieldstones. Capture them, write them down, electronically, physically, and then just label them and capture them and build a fieldstone library. Then when you want to write something, go reference your library and see if there's any fieldstones in there that you can connect. And then you could turn them into a story, or you could turn it into a book. And I've used that. I've translated that to story fieldstones. And so the first part of what I've tried to be sharp on is, instead of just spontaneously spouting a story, separate the story finding part from the storytelling part. I think that's, a lot of folks blend them, and I think that they don't do a good enough job. right? It affects the quality of the storytelling. So find your fieldstones. I call them. I think of them as story nuggets. Find your story nuggets,
right,
and capture them. You don't need a lot. If you're a leader and if you're trying to change the culture, then you might find some culture nuggets, etc. So you add nuggets, you can delete nuggets. Find those nuggets and just throw them down. This is a nugget. Now, the first time you want to use that nugget, you pull it out and say, I need a story that talks about a team, right? My teams are not taking initiative. So I want to find a nugget that I can reframe and use into inspiring a team to show them what initiative to me looks like, right? To Josh Anderson. So I grab that nugget out and and I might polish it. So if I didn't have it, I'd pull something out of thin air. I pull it out of my butt, and you may or may not pick the right nugget. Uh, my experience says we often pick the wrong ones, or none at all, or we try to make something up. So create that. So I do that in journaling. So as you and I were talking in the pre-work, I journal every day. So journaling is a way for me to capture those nuggets. They're not very detailed, and then I'll touch them over time. Now, the first time I touch a nugget, then I polish it a little bit, if that makes sense. Meaning I target the audience.
Yeah. So I
Go
want to hit
ahead.
the pause button really quick here.
Yeah, that works.
So there's storytelling from the, hey, I'm writing a book. We're not doing that. So storytelling in our world, in our realm, as I see it, storytelling, the way I use it is it helps me create an anchor or a memory point or
Correct.
something
Correct.
that I can use. So
Correct.
like a culture thing. If I'm trying to
Correct.
reshape the culture of an organization, I create a story where maybe out of that there's a reference word that we can use that, oh, when Josh says this, it means this. And there's a broader story that he told, but that's how I try and use those things.
I think,
Does
yeah,
that align with your view and your
yeah,
approach? Okay.
yeah. I think we're trying to create another way of reframing it we're trying to create a memory, a connection for
Right.
someone to
Okay.
connect to something. Absolutely. So but again, it starts with just not randomly. Oh, my team's like initiative. Hey, everyone, get over here. Get over here. I've done
Yeah.
no mental
Yeah.
preparation whatsoever. Right. Oh, I got dogs. My hound dog this morning found a bone. And it's not, I'm pulling stuff out of thin air. Don't do that. You may be actually good at it. Don't try not to do that. I would say plan. Now, Josh 10, 15 years ago would hang up right now when I say the word plan, but the new Josh might resonate with this. So grab the nugget. Second thing is I'm going to use that story, right? Now I need to target the nugget. So I think about my audience. I can use the same nugget to talk to a C-level team, the same nugget to talk to a management team, the same nugget to talk to a team or to 3 different teams. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to target the nugget, one, to the team or to the people, and two, to the point I'm trying to make. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
But I have the nugget. So I have this reusable chunk that really helps me like fine tune and keep consistency. One of the things that I think is important is to have consistency in your storytelling. So having that nugget that's a retargetable element is useful to me. Now, the first time I tell it, I'm testing it out, right? And then the second, and I might tell it to the senior execs, and then I might tell it to a team. So now I've tested it twice, and I don't have to. I'm not writing this stuff down. I'm just trying. The nugget is my anchor, the message, but my practice. I'm getting practice with retargeting that nugget, and I'm getting better over time about nailing it. So does that help a little bit? Any questions?
Yeah. So things that I think of historically when I've been trying to establish or change a culture, I guess it's kind of the same thing. Because establishing a new is, moving away from an old and starting a new. And I had these moments where I had the entire team and they were captive and they couldn't get away, right? And
Correct. Correct.
and they had to listen. They couldn't go anywhere else. You can't abuse that. You can't overdo that. So I knew it was important, and I would work really hard. And I don't think I labeled it like this, but I worked really hard to have a story. And in my team meetings, I would separate it out into two chunks. There's the, hey, here's the operational updates of what's happening within our group. Here's what's changing. Here's what's happening outside of our group that's affecting us. And then Josh had a soapbox, and the soapbox was a story time. So here's Josh talking about something that I think would help us all if we hit the pause button and we think about this. And it would be how we improve as a team, how we get more comfortable with failure, how we celebrate wins, all those various things. And I poured a lot of effort and energy into that. And it was always a little terrifying, because what I would struggle with is, am I too abstract? And so I would try and make sure I'm connecting the dots. And it was always one of those times where you look out in the crowd and maybe you get a little bit of crickets. You're like, is this landing? Or do they think I'm crazy? Or are they all just contemplating like, this is really interesting? It was one of those things where there was always a little bit of fear and always a little bit of like, is this working? I don't think that goes away. I think that's just kind of the norm. So I actually, I had a really good team, and I was able to validate it. They wouldn't just blow smoke. They would say, "Oh yeah, Josh, that was great," and then they like all roll their eyes and walk away. But I would try and validate whether that made sense. Is there anything that you've got that can help, or is that just kind of like the way it is? Like, yep, sorry, buddy, you got to deal with it.
Well, I think it's the way it is, but I think two ideas are another part of your delivery, your execution delivery. Think of it as like a piece of code that you're debugging, and you're making it better and better and better. So you're testing your story. Mm-hmm. So part of testing your story to an audience, to different audiences, is seeing how it lands with that audience. If they want more details or a more relevant tool chain, well, then you got to update the tool chain in your next telling of it. So I think you're reading the audience. I've gone as far as to ask people, how did that land?
Yeah.
Did that land? Or I might reframe it and say, this was, everyone, I'm telling this story because I'm trying to inspire your initiative in a technical context. Did it do that? Or do I need to say it in another way? So you can be as clear as testing. You can be informally testing, quietly testing, or you can be explicitly testing. I think you should test. Now you can just read the room too, right? If everyone's leaning in, I think that's your result. That's your test result, right? If I'm leaning into you, is you right? Or if people are leaning in. If you notice, there might be someone. I mean, I know everyone falls asleep when you're telling a story, but if there's, if it's normally 90% of the room and 50% of the room stays awake, that's a win for you.
Yeah.
So note
massive,
that.
huge win. Yeah.
Note to self. Let's do more of that. So I think there's a testing, and getting more practice. Now that's each nugget, Josh. I might have, 30, 40, 50 nuggets that I regularly tell.
Yeah.
Right. Maybe there's a sweet spot. I use some in classes. I use some in all hands meetings. I use some in one-on-ones, more in one-on-ones, etc. A lot of them are behavioral. I think you and I are probably similar that way. And they were trying to get behavioral points. Like, this is the attitude I'm looking for. This is the behavior I'm looking for. Leaning in versus leaning out. Taking a risk. This is the risk, right? Or asking me for help. This is my style. Mm-hmm. I might tell a story about someone, like I let them alone until they asked for help. And then I saw that they struggled, and I still let them alone. And then they really failed miserably. And I sort of, I was just like, maybe I'm seeing it the wrong way. And then that person finally came to me and asked for help. And I'm like, my first response was, what took you so long? I've been here for you. So is there something I need to change in order to make me be more receptive or more approachable? because. But I will never nag you. I will never come, or very rarely will I come to you because I'm trying to give you space. I'm trying to honor your space. So I might tell a story like that to someone.
Yeah, a evolution that I made that helped me was early in my career. I think I leaned too much into the story doing the work, and I was less explicit. And I think that created a scenario where people were guessing,
Yeah, yeah,
where
yeah.
where it wasn't clear what I was after, and it could be interpreted in many ways. So I had some stumbles and fumbles along the way, and I just kind of like had to look myself in the eye, like, okay, like stop. There's no reason for you to make it difficult on your team. They're doing their darndest. They're doing everything they can. Don't make it harder by telling this abstract story where they've got to guess and try and figure out what you're trying to say. Tell them what you're trying to say,
Exactly.
and then put a story on it.
Well, there's
Or
another quick.
tell the story and then say that's what this is about. However you choose to do it, don't make your people guess. That's to me that's failing. You are not. This is not a artistic,
Correct.
French movie in Cannes where some
May
people might
we?
get it, some people might not get it. Don't make people guess.
Well, let me give everyone Metacasters a tool. So some people call it the sandwich or the Oreo cookie. It's a very traditional tool. Everyone's heard it, but use it. Tell them what you're going to tell them. Tell them. Tell them what you're going to tell. Tell them what you told them. Tell them what you told. It's the point. What am I going to? Why? What's the point? Land the point. There's this notion of drop the mic. Drop the mic. Never make people guess. Why are you telling? What is? It's actually not why am I telling you the story. What's the point of the story?
Right.
Or think of it as land the story, land the point, land the learning, land the point, etc. Whether it's a one-on-one or a one-on-many, absolutely.
Yeah, I over created. I was trying to be too creative at various times in my career, and that led to failures in me communicating with my team. And so I had to reevaluate, like, what am I doing wrong? Like, this all feels right in my head. And then I would replay it back, not from my head. I would replay it as if I was on the other side. And to Bob's point, understanding the audience and the struggles they're having of I've got to go back and the sprint ends tomorrow. I got this story I got to finish. Like, I don't have time for this, buddy. Can we just can you move it along?
Yeah.
There's probably a little bit of that going on. And so being able to respect that and honor that and be more targeted and more precise was an evolution that I made that really made a difference. So I had to figure that out the hard way.
So clarity is another, like clarity of your message is important to check. And you can test. I think something we've talked about that a lot of people don't do is test your audience. Not just observe your audience, but test them. Another way of testing them is, towards the end, at the end or towards the end. Like I'll ask people, now, what did you hear? Or what was the primary message? I want to poll you guys. I know what I thought it was. I know what I set it up to be.
Yeah.
But what was the core landing? And I'll poll a couple people and see what they took away. And then I can adjust from that point if I need to adjust from that point.
Right.
And that helps as well. And all I'm trying to do is be absolutely crystal clear. Another thing to think about.
Hold on. I want to, before you go there.
Yeah.
As you said that, I think based on how I've evolved as a leader, being absolutely crystal clear is priority number one. Do you think there's a higher priority in storytelling?
I think it's be absolutely crystal clear in landing your message.
Yeah.
I
See,
think
look at that. That was crystal clear in the priority.
Yeah,
look at that.
There's and this is another tool or a piece of advice is don't have 20 messages. Have one. So there's sometimes people get very complex in their stories. They have multiple threads. Don't do that. Have a beginning. I call it an arc. Have a beginning, a middle, and an end. I like chess metaphors. So opening moves, middle game, end game. End game is about landing the mic and confirmation on clarity. Have a thread that goes through that one thread, please, one thread. If you have to, maybe 2, 3 at the most. But there's a video by Steve Jobs where he does actually Metacasters will put a link. There's a master class by Steve Jobs. He's doing a commencement address at Stanford University. It's about 15 minutes, and I think it's a master's class on storytelling. And I call these arcs vignettes sometimes. And so what he does is he talks about, I'm going to tell you 3 stories right in the beginning. I'm going to tell you 3 stories. And he says that. And then he dives into vignette 1, then vignette 2, then vignette 3. They all are interconnected, but they're all independent. So he lands each point very clearly. And he's quiet. He actually is silent. He doesn't rush the landing, and he doesn't rush to the next vignette. He lets it land. And he does a beautiful job of that. But for most storytelling, I would say have one thread done, right? And then if you have 20 threads, then 20 stories, 20 meetings, or whatever. But don't go crazy with that. And then opening moves is just that. Sometimes asking a question. So you want to engage, you have about 20, 30 seconds to get in people's heads. So you want to jar them. Why are we here? Or does everyone remember Project Josh Anderson and how big of a disaster that was? And does anyone want to repeat that? And how many people want to repeat Josh Anderson? No, we don't want to do that. Okay.
I do.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That one guy. Everyone just duct tape him together, right? So a question, an opening question, an opening scenario, something to grab, a joke, some humor. I like self-deprecating humor at the beginning, but there's the beginning, then there's the middle game, the meat and potatoes of your storytelling, and then there's drop the mic. And you do want to drop the mic. I'm going to shut up in a second, Josh, and see what you have.
I don't believe you.
I actually, some people want to go linearly from the beginning, like in developing their story. So I'm a firm believer in planning your stories a little bit, particularly when you're evolving those nuggets in new cases. And the way I like to do it is go to the end. What's the mic drop moment? And then go back to the beginning and say, how do I set the stage for the mic drop moment? And then just fill in between. And how do I powerfully connect the dots? I prefer that you don't go, beginning, middle, end. I really want you to say
when building your story.
When building your story.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. What's the mic drop? Boom. How do I do that? What is the one single thing that I want to say? Then go back to the beginning. How do I set the stage to do that mic drop? Then how do I connect the dots between those two things is my preferred way, which is counterintuitive for most folks, to fill in that arc, to prepare that. I'm not talking about writing down 1,000 words, but I'm talking about key idea, mic drop, key idea, opening moves. How am I going to open? And then 3 key ideas. What are 3 ways I'm going to connect the dots? And that's your frame of reference. You've at least aligned your brain in that way before you tell the story. What are you thinking, Josh?
Something that, as you were talking through that, and I replay the last 25 years of my leadership journey, one of the things that was a unlock, a game changer for me was patience. There were so many things that I saw, so many things I wanted to communicate, that I wanted to jam into people's brains, and I overstoried people. I tried to do too many things at once, and it was because I felt I've got to get all this out there. I've got to make all of this happen. Yeah. And then it was too much, too often, and the impact was minimal. And once I forced myself to be patient and have that one topic and really, really focus on landing that, really getting, as Bob's saying, the mic drop, really getting the mic to drop and land loudly and firmly and implant that thought in everybody's brain. Once I allowed myself to do that, once I forced myself into being patient, of actually saying, okay, there's 10 things you want to do. but there has to be one that matters most. Number one, I had to work at deciding what is that one thing? What is the most impactful thing that I can relay to my team? That if we make this change, we are a step change better. Understanding, figuring out what that was. So there was real work in me getting that. Then there was real work in like, okay, I've got one shot. How do I land this one thing? And really being hyper focused on how I was going to execute delivering that story. And then it was amazing how we accelerated as an organization as I was able to allow the team to focus on one thing.
Right.
And to me, that was the reality that I hit was, oh, it wasn't that the team couldn't handle it. It was that I was asking too much. I was expecting them to change in 20 different ways at once. And that wasn't fair given everything else that they were trying to wrestle with. Once I said, let's get better at this one thing and let's do this. And here's why. Then we took off. And that was a game changer for me, but it did take, like anything, there's lessons learned. And it's like, man, this isn't as good as I want it to be. What do I need to do? And
now I'll go ahead.
And the one thing that I had was I had a leadership team, set of directors that would like, after that, I would say, how'd that work? What's your team thing? What's going on? And they helped inform me of what was working, what wasn't. And people were like, oh, that was way too much. Like, what the hell were you actually talking about? Right. So try and find that feedback loop. Try and find a way to mine that. Okay. Handing back to Bob.
Real quickly, I was going to say, I'm going to disagree with you slightly. I think based on your audience, so your lens was teamward, but I would give you three. If you're a senior leader, I would give you three stories that you need to be, minimally three stories you should be telling. What is the leadership executive story that you want to be telling? What is the peer level story that you want to be telling? And what is the teamward story that you want to be telling? And they're probably different nuggets from my point of view. And you don't want to be just telling team, you want to be balancing and refining and sharpening those three stories. I'll add a little bit more. If I have a large organization, I probably have maybe 2 or 3 team stories that I'm telling to different teams. So it's not 20 though, but I want to be influencing via story at multiple levels of the organization, depending on your role. Now, if I'm a manager of a team, then I see what you're saying. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I was telling more than one story to each audience. So yes, I had a story at each level, but I was so eager. I had so many thoughts. I had so many ideas that I was trying to drive change as rapidly as possible. So I was trying to shove all these things through this tiny little straw of the change that could happen. So
but what
with
I'm
the
saying
team,
is,
I was pushing that. With my peers, I was pushing that. With the board, I was pushing a bunch of different things. I needed to like do one thing with each one.
that's what I'm okay. So we're saying the same thing.
Yeah.
But it's not the same story.
Right.
And refining that and using that. What else in my notes? I put down some notes. Be genuine, be real. The more you can mine those, the more those nuggets can be experiential. Someone asked me once in a conference, I was doing storytelling or telling stories or whatever, and they asked me this question. I'll never forget. It's like, do the stories have to be true? And I'm like in the front of the room, and I'm like, well, I mean, the smart ass in me wanted to say, no, you just pull them out of a magazine, and then you just pull out whatever you want. But then I was, yeah, in general, do I lie or do I tell the truth? And actually, for me, my response was somewhere in between. I have true story nuggets, but I stretch them. Part of my refinement of the story, the nugget, is embellishing the nugget to make my point. Now, as Josh knows me, sometimes I over embellish.
Never noticed.
I know you. Right. So I can get overzealous in my embellishment. But you know what? I don't. And the primary reason is if I don't have a root anchor sort of nugget, I'll forget the nugget. And then I will lie. I'll be telling different. I'm like that grandfather that tells different stories to the grandchildren. So I think my advice is anchor it on the truth, but embellish as much as possible to land your points. And but have this. They're close to your heart. You're not, oh, I observed the team from afar, or I read an article. I read an article in Harvard Business. That's not a good story nugget. Even
Yeah.
if you like the story, they're your stories. You have to mind, the nuggets have to come from your experience. They have to genuinely delight you. The story gets your attention before it gets other people's attention. You have to be excited about telling the story. Otherwise, it'll be a boring story to other people. So there's that genuineness of and reality of connection.
So one thing that I want to give people that will instantly destroy your story is if you over reference a previous job that you worked at, a previous place. We've all worked with the person that always starts a story of, when I was at Microsoft, everybody's like, oh my God, here we go. We're tired of this guy working at Microsoft, right? So be very careful with that. There are a ton of people that I've worked with where I've had to have the sit down and like, hey, cool. We all know you work there. We all know it was magical. We all know it was wonderful, but you're over relying on that to drive your story. The story isn't as valuable. What you're trying to do is you're trying to like leverage of this brand name, and that brand name you believe brings credence. It makes your story better. It actually doesn't make your story better. Make the story good. And the fact that it was at insert impressive company name here, sure, that's cool. But don't lead with that, because people will start to turn that off. Because usually what happens is people that lead with that every time, that's their like, this has value because of brand name X. And then the story's like, well, but that doesn't, okay, cool. That's a good story, but that doesn't change things. So that's a common coaching point that I've had to make throughout the years is the story isn't about where, the story is about the what, and make sure that there's an actual what there. And that's not, hey, I'm referencing that when I was at Spotify, and then everybody's like, okay, cool. Well, we're not Spotify.
So let me disagree with Josh a little bit, Metacasters. All I'm saying is the context does matter.
Yeah.
Right? It was at Microsoft. I spent 10 years at Microsoft. I'm going to have a lot of stories at Microsoft.
Yeah.
So one way to handle that, I mean, Josh's point is right. It's not name dropping. You want to avoid that. But context dropping is okay.
Yeah.
So you might even you might even start out with, all right, everyone, get ready. I know you're tired of hearing Microsoft.
Yeah.
But I feel like there's a really good story to share from there that's going to give us some insights in this area. So please ignore the name dropping or just filter it out and hone in on the story. Here we go. So do something like that, or just leave the name out.
Yeah.
I worked at a company, blah, and people can guess. But what I'm getting at is I think those historical stories are valuable. And depending on your resume and how often you bounced around, what's more important is the story itself.
Yes.
Right? That story and applying and getting it out there. In real world, it's not, oh, you know what? I worked at Microsoft, but I'd always hoped to do. Let me tell you a story about what we did in church. When I was at Microsoft, and it worked out really well in the pews. It's irrelevant.
Yeah.
So Josh's wisdom is right. But you know what? A little bit of Microsoft sometimes, if that's what you got, or a little bit of Spotify, or a little bit of Dude Solutions. If that's what you got, that's what you got.
Yeah, that's so what I want to impress upon viewers and listeners is use that sparingly. I have worked with many, many people that start every story with when I was at Microsoft. And so then people start to turn that off. And the reason, again, if you're opening every story with that, then what I've seen most common is the story that follows isn't actually that good. And you're trying to make an impression. You're trying to use the name to make the story better, when in reality, the story wasn't that good. So is your story as good? Does it sound as good in your head without the, when I worked at impressive company X? If it does, cool. Then maybe just leave the name out, or only use the name when you really need it. Only use that when it's like a key critical moment, or it's not landing, or people like, did that, like, there's no way that actually worked, or whatever, so use it sparingly. If you are leading with that every time, tell the same story to yourself in your brain, but leave out the when I worked at, and does the story land? Oftentimes It does not. So you need to refine and work at that. So that's a smell that I would say. With there's the agile smells and all that whole story out there. So your storytelling smell, if that's a thing that you kind of sense every once in a while, take a hard look at yourself and say, like, does my story actually land? Is my story actually good, or am I just trying to like one up people with a company name or something?
So let me role play a little one. This is one. This is a story from leader, a CTO, down to several teams in an all hands meeting or something. And I'm going to try to do this off the cuff. Um, hey, Josh and everyone, uh, this is I haven't practiced this story, and it may not land well. So I beg your patience with me. But here's the point. This is one of the most important stories I'm going to tell you. For the next 10 minutes, I'm going to get a critical message across to you. So if I tell it shittily, please still listen. Right? If I flub up and make a mistake, please still listen. Because damn it, and help me to land this sucker, because this is a critical story. So what I showed there was maybe some vulnerability. It was the importance of setting the stage in the opening moves. I was engendering a partnership in landing the ship. But I'm also looking for professionalism to say, no matter how, we're sort of talking about, well, all the story artistry is on the leader's part. No, part of it is on the leader's part. Part of it is on, damn it, this is Josh. You work for Josh freaking Anderson, right? Let's say he flubs a story. It's still Josh freaking Anderson. Open your ears, assume positive intent, and help him land the ship, right? To have some co-creation. So it's not just one responsibility for the story. There's the other side of the responsibility. How did I do with that, Josh? Anything there inspire you?
No, that's exactly. We talked about the intentionality of this is important. This matters. Here's what I'm trying to land. And everybody, I need you to remove everything out of your brains. Let's focus on this and awareness that it's a team effort. You know you're winning as a leader when your story is being told by not you. That
Hold it, everyone. Hold it. Hold it. Josh, say that again and then say it again.
your story has landed when you hear it being told by not you. My heart has exploded with joy, right? You think about the Grinch story and how his heart grew seven sizes that day or whatever it is. When I've walked through my team's, rooms or whatever, and I hear somebody almost reciting things that we've talked about, I'm like, oh, I did it. Like, this is wonderful. And that's when you know it worked. Now, here's a thing that you need to be wary of. Don't expect that to happen the first time you tell that story. It's going to take a couple round trips. It's going to take a couple things, but you are consistent. You deliver it well. You have the 3-part approach that Bob talked about, and it lands. After you're doing that for some number of months, you're going to be walking past a team, they're working on something, and you hear somebody reference that thing. And that's when you know you've done it. Now, the key is don't celebrate and be like, I did it, and go play golf, right? That means, okay, cool. That validates what you're doing. Do more of it. But that's how you know the story lands, when it's being told not by you.
It's a definition. Everyone write it down. Definition of done is what Josh said. I'm going to amplify, double down on what he said. You're not done telling that story. So remember, we talked about senior leaders, mid-level peers, and teams, and having those unified singular stories and making the point. So let's say it's a team level. There's a critical story you're telling. You've had to tell it 5 times. No, you've had to tell it 500 times. Tough. Then suddenly one day you hear it starting to replicate. Now you are done. If it happened after 5, you're done. If it happened after 50, you're done. If it happened to happen after 500, you're done. Now that's your open opportunity. As a leader, you need to have another story, right? And trust me, if you don't have another story, you haven't been doing your job. So there's another. It's continuous improvement. So grab another story. At the leadership level, uh, are the C team, are they telling your story? When they're doing that, move on to another story. Absolutely. That's your definition of done. That's your definition of excellence. And quietly applaud yourself when you hear that, or really appreciate that, because that says that you're improving. And if those durations reduce,
Mm-hmm.
then you're getting better at your storytelling.
Correct. And while we're using agile framing for this with definition of done, have a backlog. Don't scramble. Don't wait for that glorious moment of holy cow, it's working.
Right.
Don't wait for that. Be ready. Okay, cool. Boom. I got the next one ready to go. Here we go. And begin, as Bob said, try and shrink the time from first share until the team is sharing. That's your
Absolutely.
that's your measurement of how you're doing and how effective you are. And what you'll find is that when you get good at that, it will accelerate because the team has trust, the team has belief. You have been consistent with them. You have allowed them to focus and get good at one thing. And then, okay, here's the next thing we're going to get good at. And they'll get better at getting good because you've allowed them to focus. So the first time that happens, number one, celebrate, have a little drink, whatever your thing is, enjoy that. Don't gloat because you still have a lot more work ahead of you, but be ready for that moment.
There's a couple books. What I'll do is provide you some links for when we post the episode, or when you post the episode, Josh. There's one like 8 patterns. I forget the author's name, but there are these like themes. So when I talked about a nugget, there's maybe like a collection of nuggets. So stories that talk about behavior, or stories that are trying to build trust in you as a leader, or vision oriented motivation stories. So it's not just a bunch of stories. You want to think of, there's an overarching, why am I communicating? I'm communicating this to share my vision. I'm communicating this to build the culture. I'm communicating this to talk about technology roadmaps. I'm communicating this to build teams and to gain their trust in me as a leader, or their fate, whatever. There's packages. Build morale. It may be a morale building, a story for morale building. So I'll share that. It helps to have that in the back of your mind. So all stories are not just they're all technical, or they're all this. No, there's different meta types. There's different meta types for your stories. Oh man, that felt like an old blanket.
Oh, yes, it
I
did.
wanted to I wanted to call out vulnerability. The more you can, storytelling is a way to show you, to show off you, to give folks a window into you. So there's this indirect thing. Don't waste it, everyone. Right? It's like, I can show that vulnerability. I've made mistakes. Part of gaining trust might be talking about not just your success. I worked at Microsoft, but I was only a C-level employee at Microsoft, and I failed or something. But the point, showing humanness, showing that you are real, that you have failed, you've learned. Oh, a wonderful story. How have you learned? A phoenix rising from the ashes. How we dealt with failure stories is another meta type. Does that make sense, Josh?
Yep.
I love Phoenix Rising stories. Oh my God, they warm my heart so much, and sharing them with folks. So think about, as your story arc, are you sharing you, and how are you doing that? It might even be sharing, if you meet a team for the first time. Let's say you're a new leader in a team. What is your personal story? Work on
Yeah.
your. Yeah,
Yep.
it might be your why, tell a little bit of an anecdote of, why are you doing software? Why do you like technology? Or why do you like, we've done this in the Metacast so often. We've talked about, why do we have joy and love for what we do? And think about how powerful that would be the first time you're looking at Josh Anderson, and you're marveling at the size of his hat. And then he sort of also shares some personal anecdotes. Josh, give me a scenario. What have I changed? Have I changed anything in your storytelling idea, like in your toolbox? Have we changed anything in your toolbox?
Well, so as is common Josh protocol, I I kind of just do things, and I've iterated a lot. So as Bob talked through the intentional approach that he's had, I'm like, oh yeah, I got there. I remember the mistakes I made, and then I figured that out. And I probably figured it out along the way because I scratched my head like, Bob, I am struggling with this team. What should I do? And he gave me a little bit of a nugget. So over the past 15, 20 years, I've gotten a ton of coaching from Bob that has helped me. But one of the things that this is really helpful for me and how my brain works, because I'm a very reactive and in the moment guy. And so intentionality, having a framework. I like a framework as well. I don't like rules. Don't give me like 1, 2, 3, 4. I'll rebel against that a little bit, but give me a framework where I can have a checklist of like, okay, cool. Yep. Got that, doing that, doing that. And so that reframing helps me. So if we go back to the start of this podcast, Bob and I were talking, well, storytelling, like let's do that. And Bob's like, let's do our 5 things. And I said, Bob, I don't think I have any, you know. Eh, but I did. It was in there, but it's not front of mind. It was kind of reactive. So this helps me be more effective by being proactive along the way. So that's the Josh nugget. Hopefully there's different nuggets for everybody that's listening or watching. But
Well, I think we'll provide
that's a
some.
good change.
That's a good change, and we'll provide some references. There's something Metacasters called the hero's journey, which is a sort of maybe a modified arc, like an 8 to 10 step arc of, and you can see it in like cartoons or animated features. You can see it in Star Wars, for example, the hero's journey, when everything is dark, and then there's someone that meets Luke and highlights Luke, and then I am your father, and there's another dark moment. But you can see the hero's journey reflected in so many animated or so many sort of fictional movies, and not that you would use the whole thing, but it's a nice frame. The good news is there's a lot of frames out there for how to land your stories.
Yeah.
And it's something to work on. And again, our context is leadership. I think it's important to be a storyteller no matter what your role is. But if you're a leader today, like in AI, if folks that are listening, if you aren't developing your AI centric stories right now, like AI adoption stories, AI, how does the human fit in stories, AI, how do I learn? And I'm a slow learner, and how do I get assimilated story or whatever? You should be developing a set of AI for the C level.
Yep.
How do we adopt? What are your stories for adopting it, but not dropping the humans out of the equation? You need to be not today. You should have been developing those stories a little while back, but it's not too late. Is developing your story repository. It's so fundamentally important to being a leader today and tomorrow.
Yeah, I want to reiterate that. That is one of the most common questions I get as people reach out is, hey, AI Josh, what do you think? How should we be using it? What should we do? Which tool is it? And having that ready, front and center, ready to go has been very impactful for everybody that I've coached and helped along the way. And if you are a leader, have that story, because I can tell you your organization is scared right now. So
Yep.
you need to provide them with clarity on, this is who we are, this is what we're going to do, this is how it is going to work, this is how we're going to experiment, this is what's going to happen. Give them that clarity. So as a leader, you owe it not to yourself, you owe it to everybody involved, the company, the board, your customers, everybody, of this is how it's going to change us, and here's how we're going to manage that change. So please, please get out in front of that. If you don't have that, I'm begging you, reach out to me. I will help you get there. I've been putting a lot of effort and energy into this, and I'm getting to a pretty clear, here's where this can make a difference. Here's how it can make a difference in a experiential, humane approach. All right, Bob.
Maybe that's how I want to land it today, Josh, is doubling down on what you said, because I wrote down coach and role plays. Get a coach. So this is an area where you can practice on your own, but it really helps to accelerate if you have a coach, someone to coach you through it, your story prep, your nuggets, your story prep, role plays, little mini delivery. This is a place where you can engage Josh from an AI perspective. You can engage both of us from a general storytelling perspective. I would. This is something that might take you months to years to really refine, and it's a worthwhile skill to refine. It's a worthwhile skill in this AI environment to differentiate yourself from leadership. A communicator. Communication is becoming incredibly important, and storytelling is the medium for that. So again, maybe oh my God, this connects right back. Don't be afraid to get help and ask for help. And this is an area where we can coach through help by actually practicing. We can practice this stuff together. With that,
yes,
hopefully, everyone, we gave you a story to tell. So, from beautiful downtown Cary, North Carolina,
and beautiful downtown Fuquay, Arena, North Carolina,
I am Bob the Hitman Galen,
and
he is
Josh, the Hitman's Hitman.
No,
Anderson?
Josh the bowling ball Anderson. Shake,
bake.
Take care, y'all.
Wow.
What? You're the bowling ball. You gather no moss.